is News Talk.
Okay, welcome back, Dave, with you until 10 o'clock. It is Thursday night, so it means John Giles is on the line. Good evening, John.
Evening, Dave.
How are we doing after week one of the Premier League season? Do you tend to look forward to it as much or miss it as much in a World Cup summer as you might ordinarily do?
No, I look forward to it. Every season's different, Dave, whether it's pre-World Cup, after post-World Cup. It's very interesting. Transfer deals, who's going to do well, problems with different clubs. So it's different every year. It's never the same 2 years running.
And it's the first time in a while, John, that we've got into the new season with the sword of Damocles that is the transfer window hanging over so many of the managers, particularly managers in the lower regions of the Premier League, where they might still be worried planning for upcoming games. They're going to lose some of their best players. Is that a welcome development in your book, that we can actually concentrate on the football and not worry about who's going to be moving elsewhere in the coming days?
No, I think it's good to have the time limit at the start of the season, Dave. I'm not so sure it's a good idea at Christmas, but certainly for the start of the season, I think it makes everybody do their business. There's nothing worse, I think, for managers. You say in the lower divisions, after, say, 6 weeks, 8 weeks of the season, they could still lose a player like in the old days. So I think that's a help to everybody.
Yeah, they'll be left in a position where you have no time to replace that player with the money that's come in.
Yeah.
It was an interesting transfer window, although you could say that some things never changed, that Jose Mourinho had a lot of issues. He didn't get the players that he wanted. He seems to be in open warfare with his management hierarchy, Ed Woodward and the board of the club. He seems to be open warfare with his captain, although Manchester United have strenuously denied today that there's been a fallout and a war of words involving Paul Pogba and Jose Mourinho. Where do you stand when it comes to picking a side in the argument that he's had with the board, John? On one hand, you've got Ed Woodward and the Manchester United hierarchy that aren't willing to invest huge wages and transfer fees in players that are 30 years plus, and that they don't necessarily believe will be a significant upgrade on the players that are already there. They want to invest in youth. And you've got Jose Mourinho, who wants to concentrate on winning the next match, the next few months, getting the best possible finish for Manchester United this season, very much thinking in the short term.
Well, it does lead to conflict. There's no doubt about that, Dave. But I would always be on the side of the manager. I think in Mourinho's case, I don't particularly like him. I think he's been a great manager. And one of the reasons he's been a great manager is because he has been in control of the clubs when they were winning trophies. He has fallen out with them, mostly because they were on points of principle, mostly that, in who brings the players in and what players he actually brings in. So I've always admired him for that. I think at the moment he's on very, very dangerous grounds, Dave. First of all, as you say, he's fallen out with Ed Woodward. I think there's a clash going on between him and Pogba, which at the moment Pogba is winning. And I think there was a row, and has been a few rows. First of all, last year when I think he humiliated Pogba, I think that was the wrong thing to do. Pogba goes to the World Cup and comes out of a star. Then he comes to Manchester United. He was made captain last week. He scored a penalty. And from what we read in the papers, he said afterwards, well, I don't want to say any more because I get into trouble. And apparently Mourinho pulled him on that. And Pogba supposedly has said, don't speak to me anymore. Speak through my agent. Now, there's a battle going on there, and Pogba's winning it. I think from, first of all, he's alienated Woodward. Pogba is a cash cow for Manchester United with the jerseys he sells and all the various things that happens in the modern game, not just his playing ability, Dave. So I think Woodward and the board will come down on Pogba's side against Mourinho. And also there's been a very, very dangerous thing for Mourinho happened recently, reading the paper. They're thinking of appointing a director of football. Now, if they do that, Dave, then I think Mourinho will walk, because I do admire him for what he stood for in what he needs to manage a football club. And certainly if it is a director of football, the only reason you bring in a director of football is to dominate and control who comes in and who goes out. And Mourinho has always had that at clubs in the past. He hasn't had it now with Woodward because, as you said early on, the policy at Manchester United seems to be Mourinho wants experienced players that don't have a good sell-on, not in a good sell-on position. In other words, they want younger players they can sell later on. That's never been the way that Mourinho's worked. And I would go with Mourinho. I think he's got to get a successful team at the moment. And if he gets a successful team at the moment for the next 2 or 3 years, they'll have plenty of money in the bank, and then they can recruit younger players. So I would be on Mourinho's side, and lots of this argument. But I think he's in a losing position, Dave.
Well, they will say to him, John, that we gave you the money to bring in 2 defenders over the last 18 months to 2 years in Eric Bailly and Viktor Lindelof. Neither of whom, albeit in Bailly's case in particular, there were injury issues. Neither of whom have established themselves at the club. Neither of whom have improved as players under Jose Mourinho. And why should we trust you with a pile of money for a player who, albeit has proven themselves a bit more, when there's a very good chance you're not going to be around for the medium term, let alone the long term. But some of these guys, like Lindelof and Bailly, under another manager, actually could flourish. You can see why they might be just a bit wary of giving the money for these guys, and they all want to be paid in excess of 100, 150 grand a week.
No, I can understand it, Dave, but if you're in that position with the manager, then the manager has to go. If you say to the manager, right, we've given you a lot of money and it hasn't worked out, then the manager's been a failure. You can't then say, well, okay, we signed him for what he was. I'm talking about Mourinho now. But he's not doing what we want him to do.
So they knew what they were getting, is the point you're making.
Yeah, exactly.
And they can't necessarily move the goalposts on him now.
Point.
Yeah.
Mourinho hasn't changed. Mourinho is what he is. He's always been an instant man. He's never had a youth policy. He's never done the youth policy stuff. And he hasn't bought well. So therefore, you have to say to Mourinho, and that's why I think he's on a losing path, Dave, because he's fallen out with Pogba. I think Pogba will win that. And directors are not backing him. They haven't backed him in the summer, and there's a lot of talk, and I think it will happen, that they'll get a director of football. Then, if that's the case, there's no future for Mourinho. They might as well do it now and say, look, see, once they say you bought players and they didn't work out, and now you're looking for more players, that's losing confidence in the manager. Then they have to say, well, if the manager will say, Mourinho, look, you're not giving me what I want now. Okay, I have bought players that haven't worked out, but these are the players I need for the future. And they're saying, no, we can't do that. That's not our policy. That's the end of the manager, Dave.
And where else does he rock up then? Because if you look at the Premier League, all the clubs in that division, bar Guardiola at Manchester City, there's no other manager that really holds the reins when it comes to recruits and selling players from that club. Everybody else really has to answer to a director of football of some description, even Pochettino at Tottenham. And if the game is moving down that direction, which it clearly has been for the last 10 years or so, Ferguson and Wenger were the last of a dying breed, he's going to have to get used to this. And if he's not willing to adapt to the times...
It's true, but it doesn't make it right. It doesn't make the policy right because that's happening. Actually, I think Klopp is probably in charge at Liverpool, more so than any of the other managers, apart from Mourinho. Up to now, Mourinho and Guardiola, and he's getting the backing from the club to buy players. It is happening more and more because that's what the directors and owners want now, a director of football, because it's usually their director of football. They want to be in charge of the buying and selling. Mourinho has never stood for that before. Whether he stands for it now remains to be seen. But the fact that the manager is in charge, I would definitely be in favour of that. I think it's the best way. I still believe it's the best way it works. It worked for years with Wenger at Arsenal. It worked for years with Ferguson at Manchester United. But the clubs don't actually like it. I think they gave Mourinho those powers when he first came in. But they're in a position now. Maybe they have reasons for it with the buys that he's made. But that's changed now. What he was brought in to do was he was have full control of the situation. He's not going to be. I don't think he's going to be in control of it now for the future. If that's the case, then they should get rid of him. Yeah,
it does feel like we're heading down that road, doesn't it? That Mourinho will be one of the...
Every club has it, Dave, but I still go back to what I believe. I know every club is doing it, and people say on the continent all the clubs are doing it. It doesn't make it right, because if they bring in a director of football at Manchester United, the same as most of the other clubs have done, it's the director's director of football. He's not the manager's director of football. Like when Ferguson was at his best at Old Trafford in his years, actually it was his brother that did the scouting. So he was his man. It's like the situation that Brendan Rodgers at Liverpool. There was a committee of 6 that controlled the buying and selling of players. And what they said, that Brendan Rodgers always had the last say in the players that came in. But what happened there, Dave, was that they would give him a list of 6 players, and he would pick what he considered the best out of those 6 players, right? But the player that wasn't on the list, the 7 players, was the players that he wanted.
Yeah.
So they're always in a position of controlling who the manager can buy and who the manager can buy. And what I find in management and football generally, 90% of the job in management is the control of players, getting rid of players that you don't want and bringing players in that you do want. Every manager has a vision of what he wants. And the only way to fulfill that vision, if that's the right words, is to get the player on the left-hand side that I want, the centre-backs that I want, the right side of player that I want. That's the vision. Now, if somebody else is saying to you, no, you can't have him, you can't have him, you can have him, the vision has gone. That's 90%, in my opinion, 90% of the job. And if that happens to Mourinho now, and he has made a few bad buys, there's no doubt about that, I can't see him staying with that. I just can't see it. He's never done it before. Now, whether he swallows his pride, that could be a different matter. But I think he'll lose that battle. If they want to employ a director of football, they'll do so. But it won't be his director of football.
No.
It'll be the board's director of football. Things are not good with Woodward. Things are not good with Pogba. So I can't see any way that Mourinho will stay in that job.
Yeah, the odds on him lasting the length of the season, they are lengthening, those odds. John, we'll be back to you in a moment. We're going to take a quick break and then we'll have a bit more chat with John Giles.
Off the ball on News Talk.
What cost for everyone to journey further? What cost? Oh, hi, madam. No, there's no extra cost. Fuel Good standard for everyone.
The fuel revolution has begun at Apple Green with Fuel Good, our most advanced fuel ever that's yours at no extra cost.
Person at pump 3, welcome to the revolution. Hurrah, pump 3!
Apple Green, low fuel prices always.
Why wait 40 minutes for a taxi when you can get one in 4? My Taxi Business, the only nationwide taxi service with the lowest wait times. Learn more at business.mytaxi.ie.
Leia Healthcare are for the tumbles, jumps and bumps in life.
That's why we're jumping on this trampoline, talking about their exclusive free kids offer on Essential Connect Health, where you only have to pay for one of your kids' health insurance and the rest goes free.
Like me and me.
No matter how many brothers and sisters you have, it's good to live.
Free kids by Leia Healthcare. Leia Healthcare,
looking after you always.
Insurance provided by Ellipse Insurance Limited, trading as Leia Healthcare. Leia Healthcare Limited, trading as Leia Healthcare and Leia Life, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. A kid is defined as a dependent aged under 18. Offer available from September 1st, 2018.
Learning to drive? Make sure you get the most value from your driver training. Have your logbook completed by your RSA-registered driving instructor after every essential driver training session. Then record your driving practice and any questions you might have for your instructor in your logbook. Finally, check that your instructor sends each EDT session record to the RSA. You can do this by visiting MyEDT on the RSA website. Essential driver training is your path to becoming a safe and socially responsible driver. To find out more, visit rsa.ie.
At Expert Electrical, we're always bringing you the latest appliances and technology. For this month only, when you buy an Apple MacBook, we'll give you €100 back to spend in store. For more amazing offers, see our back-to-school brochure, pick up your copy in store or online. Find your local expert at expert.ie. Terms and conditions apply.
When you're a first-time buyer, it's first things first. So when finding a great low fixed rate is all that matters right now, Ulster Bank's new First 5 mortgage has you sorted. We've 5 great benefits, including the lowest 2-year fixed rate in the market. Just search Ulster Bank First 5. Ulster Bank. Help for what matters. Lowest rate claim source bonkers.ie, 29th of June 2018. Maximum loan to value is 90%. Security and insurance required. Product fees may apply. Over 18s and residential mortgages only. Lending criteria, terms and conditions apply. Credit facility subject to repayment and financial status. Warning, your home is at risk if you do not keep up payments on a mortgage or any other loan secured on it. Warning, if you do not meet the repayments on your loan, your account will go into arrears. This may affect your credit rating, which may limit your ability to access credit in the future. Warning, you may have to pay charges if you pay off a fixed rate loan loan early. Ulster Bank Ireland DAC is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
Off the ball. This is News Talk.
Yeah, John's still on the line. John, going into last weekend, the first weekend of the season, I think Manchester United were third favourites to win the Premier League title, around about 7 or 8 to 1. Having won their opening game, by the end of the weekend, those odds had almost doubled. Suddenly they were up around 14 to 15 to 1 to win the Premier League title. And I guess a lot of that was down to how impressive both Liverpool and Manchester City were. What opinions that you had going into the opening weekend of the season have you changed in the last week on the back of what you saw last weekend?
No, well, I think the odds have gone up because of the troubles at Manchester United, Dave. Well, we've covered them now, I think. But I think that's why the odds have gone up on Manchester United. Now, I think Liverpool well, they were my pre-season team to be the closest to Manchester City, if not to overtake them. I think, and that, well, they played very, very well at the opening game at the weekend. They hammered a very, very poor West Ham team, very, very poor team. But they did what they had to do, and they have strengthened in the summer, there's no doubt about that. So I think they'd be the most likely team to take over from Manchester City.
Do you think they now have a squad rather than 11, which was obviously very impressive last year? It was an 11 that was good enough to get them to a Champions League final. But as a squad now that they've brought in Keita, that they've shored things up the back with Van Dijk last January, they brought in Alisson, and they do look like a team that if they pick up 1 or 2 injuries, that they may well have enough to bolster them coming in off the bench, that they actually are a team that will last the pace now and not throw in that series of games that they have in the last 2 seasons where any chance of keeping a title till going to the very end evaporates because they pick up, say, 2 points out of 15 on offer.
Well, they've got a goalkeeper for a start, which they haven't had for the last few years. And you're not going to win anything without having a good goalkeeper. And this fella is an established goalkeeper. And as you said, they've tightened up at the back. They've got a new midfield player. So I think the buys they've made, I'm looking at them at the weekend, I haven't seen that much of the Keita and that, but he looks a good player. And you know they've made the right signings, and I think it's money that will be considered to be well spent by the end of the season. I think it makes them really genuine contenders now, Dave.
And when you look at the way the club is, the atmosphere between the fans, the connection between the manager and the players, as you've already alluded to, there's a feeling that the manager and the board are very much singing off the same hymn sheet.
Yes.
It's a recipe for longevity, isn't it, in terms of these relationships? Well, the complete opposite to what we've talked about. Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt that he was in charge of what was coming in at Liverpool. They're the players that he wanted, and they're the players that he got. Again, going back to Mourinho hasn't had that. So it's chaos at Manchester United, in my opinion. So they're going in the right direction. I think the directors feel that he's proven himself. He got to the Champions League final last year. He was in the top 4 again for this season. So he's a man that hasn't spent a lot of money at Liverpool, but needed the balance that he didn't have to go on to better things. And I think Liverpool have gone about it in the right way.
What did you make of Manchester City on the opening weekend, particularly in the back of the news that we're hearing they may well lose Kevin De Bruyne for possibly 3 to 4 months with that knee injury that he picked up in training yesterday? He didn't start against Arsenal, a game that they cruised through. They haven't really added, bar the addition of Riyad Mahrez to their squad, but they just looked like they were picking up exactly where they left off.
Well, I didn't think they played all that well, to be quite honest, Dave, on the weekend. I thought in spells they played very well against a poor Arsenal team. I thought they were very, very disappointing again. I can't see how they're going to do anything this season. But City were brilliant at times in that match. But there was spells when they allowed Arsenal to come back into the game. They weren't at their best, but they still won comfortably, Dave. Which is a good sign for any team.
Yeah, it is. We've been talking about Liverpool, and they certainly showed up maybe ways that you can get at City, that you can beat them, as they did over the 2 legs and put 5 goals past them in that Champions League tie towards the back end of last season. That there are clubs that will have taken that as a blueprint to get after Manchester City this season, and maybe it's not something City have actually helped solve over the course of the summer, particularly in centre midfield when they haven't brought anyone in. They wanted to bring Fred in, lost him to Man U. They wanted to bring Jorginho in, lost him to Chelsea. And that if Fernandinho was to pick up an injury, there's maybe a soft underbelly still to this City side.
Well, I think that's a bit unfair on them last season. I mean, Liverpool beat them twice and 3 times. but they finished about 25 points ahead of Liverpool in the league, Dave, don't forget. So, Liverpool had a softer underbelly than Manchester City, and all the teams did at Manchester City. That's the way he plays, and there's going to get occasional games where it doesn't work their way. But they've gone to over 100 points for the first time in the league and did all those things. De Bruyne will be a loss to him, but they bought Mahrez. I still think they have got the best squad of players. I think they're unfortunate to lose De Bruyne, but I think they've still got the best squad of players, and they definitely are the team to beat.
They are looking to become the first team in a decade to defend the Premier League title. I mean, you have experience of trying to do just that, trying to follow up a breakthrough season with Leeds and again later on in your career trying to win a second First Division title in a row. What are the major hindrances to doing it in terms of the temperament required? Obviously, if there's injuries or any other issues outside of your control, they can be a factor.
But it was a different time, Dave. It was a different time. Now, if you look at the Premiership, I said there's no more than 4 teams can win it. No more than 4 teams could actually win the Premiership next year. Like in my time, there was 7, I think, between Liverpool, now it's gone back a long time, between Liverpool, I think, winning the title in 1967, they didn't win it for another 7 years. And in that time, there were 7 different teams actually won what was then the First Division. So there was no team dominating it in a way. For example, there was a lot of good teams. Chelsea were a very good team in those times. Tottenham Hotspur were a very good team. But neither of them won the title in those particular years. So it's a different time. The teams that have the most money now have the most resources, and it's getting more and more so that way every year. The big teams have the big money, Dave. If you look now, you wouldn't look beyond Liverpool, Manchester City, Manchester United, Spurs, probably Chelsea winning the league. That's the way it is, and maybe 1 or 2. I don't think Spurs have any chance to win the league this year. They haven't bought a player all season.
No. I think they'll see their success being that they've held on to their players.
Sorry?
They'll see their success in the window as being that they have held on to their players.
Well, I'm disappointed in Pochettino. At the end of the season, he had to go at Levy to say, well, he's got to be brave now. He's got to put his hand in his pocket and he's got to get some players in. That's what we need. Now, last week he said to the papers, no, you didn't understand what I said. I meant that we'd be brave to not to get the players.
Yeah.
And go with the young players, which is a load of nonsense.
And now they've got stadium issues and all sorts.
He signed a big contract himself. But they were never going to... Spurs haven't done it over the last few years. I don't think they were ever going to spend money to bring in the players. And I think they'll do very well to finish in the top 4. But I don't think they've helped themselves in that particular situation.
John, brilliant stuff as always. We'll chat to you next week. Thanks a million.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, John Giles giving us thoughts on a Thursday night, as he always does here on Off the Ball. Coming up in the next hour, we're going to be focusing on the hurling final between Galway and Limerick this Sunday afternoon. And Claude Harmon III, coach to 3-time now major champion Brooks Koepka, will be in conversation with Joe.
Join that conversation. Text us on 53106. Texts cost 30 cents.
Lidl have beef, so what'll it be this week?